Hello and welcome to the Outdoor Gibbon podcast, episode 28, The Wild Order. On this episode, we have a good chat with Arthur, the creator and the owner of the company called The Wild Order. Basically, it's an educational program offering some fantastic packages to people who've never stalked in their life and giving them an experience, a hands-on experience. So we'll get onto that shortly. Just before we jump into the podcast, let's have a look at where we are in the year. We're in March now. Roebucks are just around the corner. The first of the shows has happened, which was the Great British Shooting Show at the NEC. IWA has just finished in Germany. And I think that leads us up to our next show, which will be the Stalking Show in Staffordshire. And then obviously we've got other shows to come through and then all the game fairs and everything else for the rest of the season. I can feel already that the year's running away fairly quickly, so we better get on and get some more podcasts recorded. I'm not going to waffle for very long at the beginning. Let's just jump straight in and listen to what the Wild Order has to talk about. Hello and welcome to the Outdoor Gibbon podcast. Today we have got Arthur from the Wild Order. Hello, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Obviously, anybody that follows you guys on social media will see that you've kind of you offer a great package and stuff like that, and trips to Scotland. I think that's the biggest thing we've been seeing recently. But let's kind of dig back a bit and who are you and where did it all come from?
Well, it's a good question. I have a very different background to the one I'm now involved in. Obviously, I grew up in London. Grew up a vegetarian and moved to the countryside sort of in my 20s and sort of became interested in procuring my own meat, finding out, where my meat comes from and all those things. And it all kind of spiraled from there.
So why the change? Obviously, you moved to the countryside. So why the change away from being a vegetarian at that point?
Well, I was never a vegetarian by choice, Peter. That was the thing.
Oh, okay.
I grew up a vegetarian, so my whole family is vegetarian.
Right.
So it just sort of happened that way.
Okay.
I discovered the wonderful world of meat while I was traveling in Asia, and I just got hooked on it. I got hooked because the people that I was with when I first tried meat out there were kind of very much working with the land. They were hunting, they were gathering, and it just seemed like such an amazing way to feed yourself. Sorry, I have to excuse my dog's dreaming in the background. So yeah, I kind of fell into it that way. And then when I moved out of London, I just began to get engaged in sort of countryside pursuits, as it were. And I did the first sort of course I did that got me engaged in kind of bushcraft and snaring rabbits was a woodlaw course. That's Ray Mears's.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago now, but that was amazing. And that was really my first kind of look into this kind of world that I'm now involved in. And from there it spiraled, as I said, and I met people, and I struggled, as I've said before on a few other podcasts. I really struggled to get into the world of hunting. In Sussex where I live, it's not it's certainly not Scotland. It's still fairly urban in comparison, I suppose.
Yes.
And it took a long time. It took a few years to really get my feet under the table, get some good connections, and get some land to stalk on, get my farm's license, all those things that are kind of pretty tricky to gain over down here, certainly. And then the Wild Order really came organically from that struggle, I suppose.
Okay.
But that was my journey into becoming a meat eater. Basically, was through kind of odd connections and a few courses, really. Yeah.
No, that's kind of, well, it's a different angle, because a lot of people, not 90% of the population that listen to this will probably come from a meat eating background, but to actually see it
Sure.
where somebody's come from a background that they really had no choice in, to actually be able to make that choice and go down that route, that's sort of the thing we don't hear about that often.
I think it's so common now that, obviously, I don't want to generalize, but I'm going to. I suspect that most people that hunt and eat meat grew up that way. They grew up hunting, and it's just the way they were brought up, and it makes a lot of sense. So it probably is kind of a rarity to have somebody that was brought up a vegetarian in London to now, their whole life revolves around hunting and wild meat and teaching other people to do that.
But actually, that's kind of refreshing, because you've kind of seen it from, well, you're looking at it from both views, and actually to be able to come in there and have that sort of what's the word I'm looking for, that opinion, that anybody that actually comes to you, say for example, you get a vegan rocks up and goes, I need to eat meat. Yeah, at least you can say to them, well, yeah, okay, so the best sustainable meat potential on the market is game or venison, because the nature of where it comes from.
Exactly, and I think it does give me a fresh perspective on hunting and meat and other country pursuits, because I was very much on the other side, and it's definitely stood me in good stead in terms of being able to talk about it to people that are maybe unsure about engaging in what you and I do
Yeah.
as our livelihoods. And I mean, my brother's a vegan, so I have those conversations all the time. He hasn't quite come on to wanting to eat meat yet, but I'm working on him. But I actually think, funnily enough, vegans and the Wild Order have a lot more in common than they probably think we do, because we try and foster a relationship with the land that's very close, very engaged, very meaningful. And I think if vegans could take a step back, some vegans could take a step back, they would see that what we do is as close to a really meaningful relationship with your food as growing vegetables. So yeah, I think we have a lot in common with those people. And although I have a lot of difficult conversations, certainly on social media, with that crew over there, I hope that they can sort of get on board with what we do as
I was going
well.
to say that's quite interesting. So do you get, obviously on social media, do you get quite a lot of backlash from sort of that community?
Yeah, we have done historically. It seems like either the algorithm's just not feeding it to those
Okay.
people. But oh yeah, I mean, I've been called all sorts, like murderer, and yeah, I've had some pretty nasty messages. But generally, we just try and meet that with kill them with kindness. That's what we say.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Educate, and if people aren't going to see, people don't want to see through that kind of I don't want to say misinformation, but if they don't want to see what we're doing in a positive light, then they won't, and that's fine. I just don't want to be trolled.
Yeah, no, I think unfortunately, I think I've spoken about this many times before. The Disney effect has a massive sort of thing to answer for what it's done for society. People believe that, like, a deer running around the hill has these big doe eyes and and doesn't do any damage, but actually you've been up to Scotland, you've seen the population of red deer, and it's basically a herd of cows moving across the landscape.
Yeah,
And there is nothing to manage them apart from, unfortunately, us now, the human beings that are here.
exactly. I actually had a conversation with somebody on social media about this, and I said that we have to, we are essentially now the predators, which he got very offended about, and sort of was saying, so you see yourself as a predator? And I was like, well, essentially, yes, that is, we are acting as wolves and bears and whatever, that's because we removed those from the landscape however many years ago. And so this is where we are. it has to be done. And it just so happens that the meat is delicious and the landscape's amazing. And, you know, there's so much more to it than just killing a deer, as you know, I'm sure.
The killing of a deer is a very clinical. It's a 2-second process in theory. That's the whole run up to it and the process afterwards. That taking that animal and turning it into food for many is the way to look at it.
And that's where the value really lies in, you know, it's obviously some people really get a kick out of hunting and pulling the trigger, and you know, that's their prerogative. But what we kind of try and champion at the Wild Order is the whole process. It's engaging with nature meaningfully, being in the landscape, being aware of what's around you, knowing how to identify trees and plants and cross rivers properly, and enjoy seeing a golden eagle like we did up at, in the Highlands recently, and all those kind of things. And then, you know, there is the somewhat violent act of taking a deer, which, you know, you can't get. When you kill a deer, it's a violent act, and that's just how it is. But then there's so much more after that. It's getting it to the larder and hanging it and doing all that process, taking, you know, the larder information that's of great value to the estates up there, and then turning it into a food product. And, you know, it's there's so much to like feed yourself with in terms of knowledge and inspiration, and just having that. I keep repeating it, but it's like the meaningful engagement with nature, which is so important.
It is, absolutely. It's kind of a moment of time that, like, you'll have known being out on the hill, and probably when you're out stalking down in Sussex, it's almost a shutdown from society in some ways. You get that moment to step back in sort of complete time, and nothing matters. It's just you trying your approach onto an animal of some description, and you hear nature, you see nature, everything around you. Almost it kind of slows down, and you don't have to worry about the real world for a few minutes.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And I think, you know, when on the rare occasion that I go back to London to see a friend or something, I sort of look around, and I have this voice in my head saying, oh, this is what people call a civilized society, but it never feels civilized to me. What feels civilized is being out in the hills or in the woods and having that like real understanding of what's going on, and a connection to, you know, our ancestors and all of those things. And I think if more of us did that, we would, you know, obviously everybody can't be hunters, but everybody can experience it. You know, they don't have to fire a rifle. They could just come and have a look, get engaged, see what it's all about. And it's a very humbling experience. And that's something that it isn't often spoken about, I think. And a lot of media just, I mean, God, deer in the media, you know, every other day at the moment. It's crazy. And I mean, that's a whole nother subject, isn't it? But I think that's something that isn't portrayed enough when we talk about hunting, stalking.
It's a difficult one, because I've got a lot of obviously I went to school down in Sussex and things like that, and a lot of my friends, a lot of my school friends are still around London. And it's been really interesting, because obviously they see my lifestyle living up here, doing what I do, and some of them have come up and have been out with me. But I rocked up to see a bunch of them, and I walked across from somewhere and just walked over to see them at a pub, and they're like, "You walked?" It's like, yeah, left leg, right leg, body follows. It's kind of one of those things. I'm used to walking miles around the hill. Oh my God, you actually walked. And it's like, yeah, it's but for them, it's like you jump on a tube, or you jump in a taxi, or you get the bus. But no, for me, no issues, happy to walk it. But it's a totally different world. Like I don't mind visiting London, but I'm so happy to be on the train away from there, or on a plane out of there. It's fine for a few minutes, but as you say, but you watch that society go by, and they're blissfully unaware of what's actually happening in the countryside.
Yeah, for sure. And And that kind of, in many ways, I don't mind that, because it means the countryside isn't completely overcrowded all the time, selfishly. But I really get a kick out of seeing people having their eyes open to, like I had. I mean, I sound like some sort of born again. I'm not at all. But I really did have my eyes open to a world that I was completely unaware of. And now I'm aware of it. I can see its importance and its beauty, and I love, being able to share that with people. And that wasn't something that that isn't why I started the Wild Order. That's just something that happened along the way. So yeah, urbanites, come get on board.
I was going to say, so that actually leads us really nicely on to the next part, which is obviously the Wild Order. How did it come about, and the team you've surrounded yourself with?
Well, I'll start with the team, because without them, obviously, it would be a shit show. I've got my sort of right-hand man, Alex. He's a great guy and a photographer. Not a hunter until recently.
I was going to say, it looked like he recently he was up in Scotland and I think had his first animal.
That was, that was the first year we ran the Hunters Experience. So
right.
Yeah, just over a year ago. He took his first red hind I guess a year and a half ago or something like that, up in Scotland with us, which was great. And since then he's been stalking with me in Sussex a sort of handful of times. He's very much kind of behind the camera, big into his food, and just a great guy to have on board. So yeah, very grateful for him. And then there's obviously a guy called Matt Moss, who I've worked with for years. He's a tree surgeon, as I was, and a hunter. I kind of cut my teeth hunting with him in Sussex. So
okay,
it's nice to now have him on board with the Wild Order. He's a good guy. He guides for us, and he's just very knowledgeable. Great to have him on board. And then obviously, I work with Sam Thompson. Do you know Sam Thompson?
I've been trying to get him on a podcast, but you'll have to nudge him up and tell him to get in contact. He's a
difficult man to get a hold of. But yeah, we met via social media, as is so often the way these days. And I spoke to him back in 2019, I think, and I had this wild idea that I wanted to run a sort of backpack hunt through the Scottish Highlands, and it was going to be winter. And he said, "You got to be fucking mad! I'm not doing that." And then, so he rather burst my bubble. But I think a year later, he called me up and said, "Well, I don't think that will work. I'm now working on a new estate, and maybe that other idea you had could work." And so, yeah, full steam ahead, and we are now here in I guess this is beginning of our third year, and so he's a great champion for us, and I'm very grateful for him too. And then other people have come out of the woodwork along the way. We've got kind of Mark Zabrowski, who's a great supporter of ours. And that really makes a huge difference to the Wild Order, is having people around me, I suppose, but also what we do, sort of lending support, cheering us on, and just because it's hard and kind of lonely sometimes, running a small business and like grinding away. It's great to have people within the industry championing you, and that's not always the way within our little world, as I'm sure there's kind of sometimes if you're trying to do something different or new, people, it kind of frightens people, I think.
I was going to say it's a tricky one, especially when I think when I had Rob Gearing on, he mentioned that if you look at the number of firearms licenses within the UK, it's a tiny proportion.
It's something like 500,000.
Yeah, it's nothing compared to the population of the UK, and yet we're this tiny pocket, this tiny parcel of people, and we're trying to do so much. But yeah, it's getting our voices out there and actually getting heard.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I spoke to Mark today on the phone. We had a catch up because he was up in Scotland with me. And we were talking about this little pocket that is the hunting industry in the UK. And we were talking about maybe going to the shooting show at the end of the month. And that's all very good. And, I'm supportive of all those things. But, in many ways, me going there is completely useless because I'd just be preaching to the converted. What I need is those people in London on the tube, sat on the tube, to come and join in and see that what we're doing is not barbaric, but it's very civilized.
Well, I think this is where I'm actually starting to this podcast is now going out to people that are non-hunters. I get messages all the time saying I'm interested in doing stuff and things like that. So off the back of this, with my social media feed, we've had guys up to Scotland. One guy especially came up to harvest a deer. It's all been broken down, vac-packed. It's about to go in the post to him. So it does go to show he wanted a sustainable source of meat. He really wanted to do it. He came out, did his target shot, fine, took his deer, and it was a great day. I did walk in 14k, but that's all part. That's all part of it at the end of the day.
That's what when I first started, that's what I wanted. When I very much saw myself as a meat hunter when I first started. I just wanted to take one or two animals. I wanted to fill my freezer. Job done. As it turns out, things have developed, and I now manage, deer herds, not over massive tracts of land, especially compared to people up in Scotland. But I fell in love with the way of life. That the team is great. What was the other question you asked me? You asked me how it started.
Yeah, how it all sort of came about. Obviously. Was it like an idea on the back of a table mat in a pub sort of thing, or was it something else that sprang out?
I think it really came from the struggle that I went through to become a hunter myself. That's where it came from.
Okay.
I really struggled. To find good people that I felt comfortable with when I was starting out. I just really struggled. It took sort of 2 or 3 years to really get my feet under the table within sort of the deer world in Sussex.
Unfortunately, I was going to say Sussex is the south. Anywhere down south. Well, as soon as you mention deer, this green-eyed monster comes out, and people become very protective, and they don't want to share that experience.
And I think that is quite a big issue within deer stalking, just generally. You kind of get stonewalled. People have like huge areas of land that they look after, and they take their clients out, or maybe they just are a professional stalker and they're being paid, but they slam the door in your face because they're scared that you're going to take their land from them, even if you tell them that you're not going to. So I did struggle, and I thought I was thinking about how I could do what I love and make a little bit of money out of it. And so I kind of started to develop this idea and spoke to Sam Thompson about it and a few other people. And I was already working for another company that do like deer butchery days and stuff down here. And so the network grew and the idea grew kind of organically from there. And then, nobody was targeting people. I don't want to keep saying urbanites, but nobody was targeting people that sort of just had no recourse to hunting.
No,
and
absolutely.
So, and if I had the opportunity that I give people, I would have been all over it. I would have been signing up. And that's kind of my litmus test for all the courses. I'm like, right, so would I have wanted to do this in my life when I was green to hunting? And if the answer is yes, then we'll take it further. And that's stood us in good stead so far. Most of the people that we have on our courses are totally novice hunters. Some have, people have been to a firing range or done a bit of, CCF at school or something.
Yep.
But very, very few have any experience, and they're exactly the people that we want. And they come from all walks of life and from all over, well, not quite all over the world, but we've had people from America and Germany and somewhere else, can't remember.
That's really cool though, that you actually, because
great.
obviously, I was going to say, because obviously hunting in Germany and places like that in the States is still very much, it's still ingrained in the community. Obviously the UK, we've moved away from that, but you go out to Germany and there's a high seat pretty much on the corner of every field.
Yeah, in France too, it's just
driving
past them.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things, but to actually get somebody that, I suppose in the cities and stuff like that, it has become less of a knowledgeable thing, and people have moved away from it.
I think the other thing that maybe we do slightly differently is that a lot of hunting courses are quite formal, like the DSC1, for example, or maybe like hunter safety in the States or something. I'm actually not very knowledgeable about those courses in say Europe or anything like that. But they you have to be very committed to do those courses. Yeah. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be committed to come on one of ours, but it's I like to think that what we give people is a sort of more accessibility, just because it's wrapped up in an accessible package where people go, I can totally do that. I don't need a firearms license. I don't need, a bit of land. I don't necessarily want a hunter's number. I just want to go and see if this is for me. And I think that's really important. And maybe places in France and Europe, France and Germany and wherever, maybe they don't have that either.
Maybe not. Maybe you have to get your hunt. I think in Germany you have to get your hunter's permit before you really go out and do that. So you can't sample it. I think, as I've said before to people, we're very, very lucky and almost spoiled in the UK with the population of deer we've got. And if you can find the right person, the access to deer can actually be really good.
Oh, it can be better than anywhere else in the world. I mean,
absolutely.
New Zealand, but
Yeah, pretty much. Well, New Zealand's like walk into the local paper shop, buy your ticket, and off you go, kind of thing. Yeah. Really, if you've got a bow or something like that, you're away.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but to be honest, I think down where you are, you'll have obviously things like muntjac, fallow, some roe, stuff like that to get onto. So realistically, a wealth of stuff, and the deer population down there is still, it is very high. The fallow numbers are large down where you guys are.
It is high. It's very high. I mean, I was out just the other day, and you can quite easily see 200 fallow in a field.
Yeah.
And that's not an unusual thing to see. Although I do feel like the numbers are coming from where I am, where I stalk. The numbers seem to be coming down.
Yeah, you don't have the super herds. Yeah.
But what I'm beginning, this is like probably beyond this podcast, but what I'm beginning to worry about is with all the rhetoric in newspapers about like we must cull millions of deer and all the rest of it, is that nobody's actually getting any hard data.
No.
Nobody knows how many deer I shoot on where I stalk, and nobody knows how many deer my neighbor shoots on their farm. And that feels like a bit of a sketchy place to be when you're talking about deer management. I mean, certainly where you are in Scotland, I'm sure you're part of a big deer group over a great swathe of land, and numbers are recorded, and therefore you have data, so you know what's going on. Down south, we don't have that.
It is a shame. You'd have thought that there would be something in place, because obviously, we deal with S&H. Now, some bits of the land that we shoot on, for example, our reds, some of them come into what's called a Section 7. So there's a designated coal target that has to be reached, and we have to feed that back. But other bits of land aren't. But obviously Tom, who I stalk with, he's got a very good feedback with SNH and gives them all the numbers of everything we've shot, so they know what's going on. And then we know how many the target is for, like, I think there's 17 estates around us. We've got an open number of deer that need to be culled, so there's still 100 deer open. Please take those, and if we get that number, well, happy days, we've met the quota.
Yeah, and that's like what a powerful position to be in as a deer manager to actually know to know what your targets are, to know what the data is.
Absolutely.
But I mean, I could probably rant on this subject for a long time. But I guess it's
But maybe that's something the deer stalking community, we actually need to kind of instigate. We need one of these governing bodies maybe to actually step up. I know we've got the BDS, but they like to give you their numbers and their sheets of paper and all the rest of it. But maybe it's one of those things they should send a survey out and say, look, can we get what you've culled this year and what you've shot? And then we actually get data, don't we?
Yeah, for sure. And because what the position that we don't want to find ourselves in is that they've taken the buck season away for fallow in Scotland, haven't they?
Yeah.
It's almost certainly going to happen down here. And what we don't want to find is suddenly that, we've hammered the deer so heavily that suddenly we've got this like a terribly mismatched proportion of female to male, or maybe there's, suddenly not very many at all. I mean, that's probably not likely, but it's the kind of, when you're in the dark, which is what we are down here, it's a worrying position to be in. And I think it's not too much to ask for a governing body just to, say, hey, deer stalkers, just send us, your cull records. But this all feeds back into people guarding the gate and being worried that somebody's going to come knocking and be like, I want your bit of land, or you can't do that anymore. But knowledge is power, and at the moment, certainly down here, that's not the case.
Well, this is exactly kind of what happened over in Southern Ireland. So the deer population was out of control, but cull records would go back slightly incorrect. Or I remember being there in the office one afternoon, standing with the guy on our syndicate, and literally, how many deer did you shoot? Oh, I got 2 this time. Well, we'll call that 20. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. How can you just like make my number 20 when I've shot 2? But it looks good for us. So suddenly the forestry get this back that there's like 4,000 deer, but actually there was maybe only 1,000 deer. So their numbers look like the deer population's out of control. And it's the same down. It's probably the same around the rest of the country. People account, unless we have an actual proper count. There are going to be the super herds that you see. You see them on the TV, around Peterborough places and stuff like that. Super herds of fallow. But that again goes down to the land they're crossing and the stalkers that are on it. If they're already there to make money by shooting big bucks, they don't want to shoot anything else.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's a problem. I mean, I think it is. In this day and age, with apps and all the rest of it, how easy would it be just for a government body to sort out an app? You sign up to, you put your hunter's number in. When you shoot something, you record it. You don't have to necessarily say the exact location.
It just gives you a number. Yeah, exactly.
Know how many are being shot. It just seems mad that isn't the case.
Well, there you go. That's the Wild Order Part 2. You create the app and off you go.
Watch this space. Yeah.
So you kind of touched on it. Your target audience really for this is people that have never been out stalking, or just show an interest, or want to understand where their meat comes from.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to pigeonhole myself too much. I mean, our door is open. If somebody is new to hunting or they are a seasoned veteran, they are welcome. I like to think that they will learn something, however skilled they are. We have had experienced hunters come along, and that's great.
Okay.
The people that we work with, the Sam Thompsons and the estate crew there, and this other estate on the West Coast, and the Matts and Alexes and Marks that make up the Wild Order, all bring their little bit of expertise, and so I think there is something to learn for everybody. But having said that, the Wild Order is there to engage people in hunting and to boost the hunting profile. And for that to work, we need new blood coming in all the time, and to sort of not necessarily be like disciples, but just to be engaged in nature and to be engaged in what you and I do every day. And so yeah, our target audience is people, novice hunters basically, or people that want to learn more about butchery, because that's another thing that's lacking massively in the deer world. You know, you can be a great hunter, but you might completely mess up, you know, when you get the animal home.
Absolutely.
Really try and advocate turning that animal into like really high quality meat as well.
I suppose, yeah, because a lot of people you find that I've had them, they've come out to deer stalk and they're like, oh, but I'll just watch a YouTube video. And it's like a YouTube video really doesn't give you the hands-on experience. It's better to be with somebody. So I remember when I first learned to butcher, and it was literally having a friend there, and he's like, you do this, this, this. He was self-taught, but to be honest, now it's like you learn your own route. You can break a deer down, you can get the right cuts out of it, and away you go.
Yeah, and I think, you know, everybody has their own methods to breaking down a haunch or skinning. Everybody's got their own little tricks that helps them. But what we like to do is just to give people the fundamentals, so that they're going home with a decent amount of knowledge, where they can either buy an animal in skin from a local stalker or game dealer or whatever, or they can, you know, get their firearms license and shoot one, and they can take it home and they can be somewhat knowledgeable about how to go about breaking it down into a really high quality food product. Because when I first became a hunter, I had no idea. I got my first fallow doe home, and I thought, I better watch some YouTube.
Yeah, totally. Because you've got a deer there, and it's like, it's not really a big rabbit anymore. I can't skin it by like peeling it down the middle and putting it over my knee kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah.
So that's a kind of big aspect of what we do is we like to see people go from the range all the way through to taking an animal to the larder, and then depending on where we are, you know, around a table, butchering down their animal or another animal, trimming up back straps, rolling shoulders.
Fantastic. So no, I completely agree. And I think that's the thing. I've offered people in the past like to come out I ran things on Facebook and Instagram, and it's like, come for a free stalk if you do this and stuff like that. And it was amazing, the uptake and people just coming out. But it's to give them the whole experience. It's like, well, we'll go to the range, we'll do this, you can shoot it, but I'm going to make you watch me, or you can take the leg off or do this part. And it's the whole bit that they actually get hands on, because I think commercial stalking, unfortunately, is very much exactly what it is. It's commercial stalking. You shoot the animal, it disappears into the back of a motor and it's gone. You never see it.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the whole process is, and we've had it on the hill this year, lots of people have said, wow, you've given us so much information. You've explained the grollet, you've pulled out the intestines and looked at the mesenteric glands and trying to explain everything to them. They're like, I've never heard about that before. And it's great. It's all part of the process. It's part of the day on the hill, isn't it, really?
Absolutely. And people want that knowledge.
Yeah.
You know, in my experience is that, you know, if you keep that knowledge for them, that they don't know it's there.
Yeah.
So they're not hungry for it. As soon as you start imparting that kind of knowledge, people really engage. And that's cool when people really go, oh, right, yeah, I didn't know that. I've shot loads of deer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It may well be done.
But they've never been explained, because everybody's asked, what are you doing? Because my thing is, intestines out straight on top of the stomach, lay them out, and everybody's like, what are you looking for? And you kind of start explaining, and it's just one of those things. It's only 5 seconds really to just tell them and go, yeah, I'm just checking the health of the deer at the end of the day before we drag it off down the hill.
Yeah.
But it's stuff like that. Every day is a school day, and it doesn't matter. I think you touched on it earlier on. It doesn't matter who you are, you will always learn something new. And you can be the most seasoned hunter. If you're open to it, you'll see somebody else do a technique and you'll be like, I like that. I really do. That's a really simple thing that suddenly, oh, I've done it this way. And I've always tried to explain to people when you're skinning stuff and things like that, you watch some guy and he does it really quickly. If it takes you half an hour, it doesn't matter.
Mm.
It's not a rush. It's not a race. Once it's dead, it's dead.
Yeah, it's about the finished product, isn't it? And it's about
Exactly.
giving it, it's the right amount of respect when you're handling it in the
Yeah.
larder. Yeah, I picked up so much because I'm hungry for knowledge, because I was so shit at school. Now I'm older and maybe slightly wiser. I'm trying to make up for lost time, so I'm like always trying to learn. And when I go to Scotland, it's these guys are doing it as you are, way more than I am. And I'm always picking up like awesome little tricks that I think that was worth the 3 weeks up here.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just that. Yeah.
Yeah.
One moment, one bit of knife work and something like that, and you're like, that made life so much easier. And it's so simple. So talking now about the future, what's the future plans for the Wild Order?
Good question. As I think I mentioned a bit earlier, it's kind of constantly evolving, or needs to constantly evolve. The hungry beast of Instagram keeps us on our toes, obviously, the whole time. I think the future really looks much like what we're doing now, but just pushing out into more areas in terms of wild food. So maybe, obviously, we're deer specialists at the moment, and we will stay deer specialists.
Yep.
But we're going to add in other aspects. So we're going to start working with an estate on the west coast of Scotland this year, and we're going to add in some free diving,
okay,
and some fishing, which kind of just takes the pressure off the deer stuff, and maybe encompasses a slightly different clientele that will be interested in the deer stuff, but they're also interested in a bit of foraging, a bit of fishing, maybe more cooking, and we're calling that the adventure series. So that will be a more adventure based week up on the west coast, and we'll include wild goats and things like that in there. But
fantastic.
We'll also be doing, on every course you will be learning how to skin and butcher. That's kind of the fundamentals will stay true throughout. And then just plugging away, boosting the image of hunting, as I like to say, and just building on it. So we've got the Hunts Experience. We're going to have this adventure series, and we've got our day courses, and then we also work in Suffolk on a smaller estate called Wickham Vineyards.
Okay.
We do our introduction to hunting course there. And so we're just going to build on the current foundation, but have more of the courses, and more cooking courses in the future.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's the thing. Everybody gets a piece of venison, and then they're like, "What do I do with it? Do I just mince it?" And a lot of people, I think, they mince and dice a lot of venison, and it's like, you could do so much more with it. Why would you do that?
Yeah, and there are so many. Obviously there are so many things you can do with venison, but also so many cool cooking techniques that we can use as well, like ground ovens and acidors and fire cooking and all the rest of it. So putting those amongst our courses is probably the future, because it makes it more accessible, and I think it grows our audience, and at the end of the day, that's what we're aiming for.
Fantastic.
Yeah, which is exciting. I'm going up to Scotland actually next month with Alex to recce this estate properly, and to get things nailed down, and then we'll launch the course hopefully at the end of March. And so keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah. Well, as I say, what we'll do is make sure that your website's covered on the sort of the brief on the podcast. We'll put your Instagram handle up there as well, so that people can go and see it. But yeah, it's one of those things. I think that Instagram's a great place, and social media can actually work really well if we all work together and we share the right stuff. I know there's some problems at the moment that all the hunters and anybody's talking about, that Instagram, if you get something wrong, that's it, you're on the naughty list. And we're kind of being persecuted for actually not actually doing anything bad.
I know, it's madness. We actually can't. We have been put on the naughty list a few times, but we've sort of managed to get off, I think. But we can't collaborate with some people now because their accounts are constantly banned, not being shown to new followers, and we need to be careful and make sure we are being seen, because if we're not being seen, we're not doing any good, right? So
No, absolutely, and I think
things will change, I think, but it is tough out there for us at the moment.
it's a weird situation at the moment. I think the world has become very much wrapped in cotton wool, and if you go against it, but you can post other rubbish, no problem at all.
It's not. You take a completely innocent picture of a knife on a chopping board and you get banned, but then you go onto the explore page and you see somebody being hit by a car, and you're
Perfectly allowed, yeah.
what? Where's the sense in that? It doesn't make any sense at all.
But it makes no sense at all. But I suppose it's one of those things. Yeah, people must have a sick sense of humour if that's allowed, and yeah, it's quite sad, really. But yeah, processing of food and where food comes from is a banned topic, or mentioning a rifle or a knife. But yeah, as you say, something falling off a roof or hit by a car or something like that. Yeah, crack on. We'll just make that happen.
It's going back to that whole that conversation around what is civilized, and that being out in the countryside or in the mountains or wherever, working hard honestly to forage food or to fish or to hunt is as civilized as it gets, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And all that other rubbish that you see on Instagram is, not civilized. But hey, I'm not going to rant.
But if you can send one person away from your course, or I can send one person back home that sits in a pub in London with 10 friends around them, and they can explain, because you've given them the information to explain it correctly, it might get another 2 interested. Well, that's another 2 that
absolutely
work, and that's all you're really after, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, the aim is that we want to stop hunting being a dirty word.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
And I think the tide is turning, but it's slow.
And I think it will take a bit longer, but I think currently, obviously, the buzzword was being a vegan, but I think that's changing because people have suddenly realised that actually it's not brilliant for your health. There are drawbacks to it.
Definitely. In fact, the first podcast I did was a vegan podcast, believe it or not.
Okay.
It's called, I'm going to forget, which is embarrassing. It's called something like Conversations with Conservationists or something. Anyway, he was a vegan and he wanted me on his podcast because he had now health problems. And so he had to go back on his belief system and start eating meat because he was suffering because of it. So nothing against vegans, but just eat wild meat.
Exactly. Yeah. There's nothing better than it. As we tell anybody that listens to this, and they all know anyway. But yeah, wild meat has the best life, to be honest, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to mention, but before we sort of draw this to a close?
It's been a broad-ranging chat so far, hasn't it? I think I feel, as always, I'm very grateful to given the opportunity to talk about the Wild Order. It's something that I'm deeply passionate about, and I hope that we can keep sort of engaging people in what we love. So I think we've covered a lot, and yeah, just if you're interested, have a look at our website, or drop me a line on Instagram or something.
No worries. I'm sure. Well, as I say, I'll make sure all the links are there and everybody be there. So hopefully that's good. And then we'll plug away and we'll put some information up, and I'm sure you'll get some more responses from it.
That's great. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all. Thank you ever so much for coming on.
Awesome. See you around.
Cheers. So thanks for listening. If you found anything in that interesting, obviously go and have a look at what they offer. And remember, it's not just completely for novices. They do actually offer days if you wanted to go there and you're a seasoned hunter. As I say, every day is a school day. You might actually learn something or a different technique. Anyway, the next podcast we've got coming up, we're actually going to jump across the channel and we are going to chat with a Swedish huntress and have a look at some of the differences of hunting out in Sweden compared to the UK. So stay tuned, and hopefully that one will be out within a couple of weeks.